Okay, look, I know it's crazy to call a Gen 10 theory this early, and you're right. But there's something I really want to explain to you guys. And no, I'm not trying to clickbait anyone. I actually have something that I think we should take into notice right now. You see, I think I found something ever since the new trailer dropped for Legend Z, and it's been happening for quite a while, like 6 years I think. And this theory seemingly connects to every Pokemon game we have been given ever since we got Let's Go. So please, just listen to me, and I promise I will not mislead you. So before we dive into Let's Go and everything, I want to talk about someone who mysteriously is the best known Pokemon leaker on Twitter, Riddler. Riddler is probably one of the most popular, accurate, well-known Pokemon leakers towards hints for Pokemon DLC content and next game stuff. However, this year was a confusing time to be paying attention to Ku's riddles. Apparently this year for Legend Z, Ku's only given us 2 hints, one being a digital 8 and the other featuring 6 Pokemon. These hints were pretty much only out for a week, so fans didn't really have a lot of time to decipher what Ku was saying. Not only that, but the riddles appeared to be very misleading and meaningless when it came down to the revealing of a new Kalos game. Now, most people of course didn't really care about Ku's riddles, and were just excited about revisiting Kalos and exploring a new story. Though on the contrary, there were some people that just became very confused and upset over what Ku said to them. You see, people wanted more of a clear answer to how Ku's riddles pointed towards Kalos, and how his past riddles before the DLC even lead to a new Legends game. There is pretty much no clear answer to this, and no one truly has an answer to how these riddles all intertwine with Legend Z. It's just a huge mess. But even so, I think I know what actually happened. So remember what I said on how the riddles Ku posted were only posted for a week? Well, he actually never posted them all at once. The only riddles Ku actually posted was the Digital 8 posted in 2 different versions on 2 separate dates. The first one having no background, and the second one having a white background a few days later. And soon before Presents was about to start, that's when he posted the final riddle, giving no one time to decipher its meaning. So now I want you guys to question this. Why would Ku post 2 Digital 8 pictures on separate dates? There is no second game set to release for Legend Z, and Legends games usually only have 1 version. The answer is, I think he messed up. At first glance, it seems very unlikely for Ku to mess up somehow, but if we were to speculate the situation a bit, I believe we could get a more clear answer on what just happened. You see, prior to these riddles, Ku was teasing a lot of Unova game stuff, because fans were eager to predict a Unova remake due to the Scarlet and Violet DLC featuring a lot of Unova. And even more prior to these predictions, Ku posted previous clues towards Pokemon's next game that ended up having no meaning. So putting Ku's misleading clues together, with the fake teases about Unova, and only giving fans a short time to decipher clues, then I think Ku only knew about the Legend Z game for only about a week. It would explain why so many people were left confused. It wasn't that Ku was lying to us, yet he didn't have much time to even create the riddles in the first place. And Ku obviously didn't want to keep fans waiting too long for riddles, so he instead stalled by going along with what everyone was saying. He wanted everyone to feel excited about the Pokemon Presents rather than only relying on him to give away the answer. So by stalling, it gave him more time to think on how he's going to do these riddles and how he would make them aim towards Legend Z. So in the end, it's not Ku that I feel like we should concern ourselves about. He is technically, as we know, the only kind person enough to give fans a hint about what's going to happen next in the Pokemon franchise, and I think no matter what, we should all respect him for what he does, because without him, we would just be relying on ourselves to solve the next game. But wait, you came to see a Gen 10 theory, right? Well, you see, the reason I told you guys this whole story is because there's a second part to this. You see, Ku's riddles always usually have some meaning behind them, right? Well, do you think when he posted the 2 hints, was he really trying to troll us back then? Or do you think that there was some kind of meaning behind them when he originally posted them? I mean, it's a little unclear to think a thought like this right now, but deep within the timeline, I think I know what Ku was hinting at before. You see, I found out that there may actually have been some sort of 3rd book not really mentioned within Scarlet and Violet. In fact, this book isn't even like the Scarlet and Violet book. It isn't even found within Paldea. See, the truth is, I think that the book Ku was hinting at was a book from Galar, best known as the Dragon Fairy Tale. A fairy tale that talks about a beautiful Sylveon taking down a dreadful dragon. This fairy tale is something that is mentioned within Shield's Pokédex when you catch Sylveon. However, you can never find it in Scarlet and Violet. Now you may be asking, how would I even know these 2 riddles connect to the book in the first place? Well, it has something to do with a lot of things. And what I mean a lot of things is pretty much a hint that's seemingly been going around the whole entire Switch timeline. In any case, hints that were given ever since we got Let's Go. I know it seems like a lot, but let me break everything down for you so you can understand. So let's start with the Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee games since I mentioned them first. Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee is obviously best known as the game that integrated Pokemon Go physics towards the Kanto region, which creates a somewhat new remake of Red and Blue. However, when I was looking back into the Let's Go series, something about the game really intrigued me. You see, Pikachu does something iconic that a lot of fans know about, which is him riding on a trainer's shoulder. This is a big reference to the original Pokemon anime where Ash's Pikachu rides on Ash's shoulder. Now personally, when I think of this, I think it's a very important key note to compare about Let's Go to. You see, Ash and Pikachu have been doing this since 1997, so clearly it's obvious that Let's Go was doing something to familiarize Ash's story with players when they were revisiting Kanto. However, due to this, there's a big question I have about the Let's Go series. What's Eevee's purpose? Eevee clearly is a Pokemon that doesn't really have anything to do too much with the Pokemon anime. Not to mention, no one has ever really seen Eevee travel the companion like the way it does in Let's Go Eevee. I mean, I guess you could say the closest person to this would be Chloe in Pokemon Journeys, but not everyone really knows who Chloe is. It just begs the question, why was Eevee even chosen to be the second starter? Eevee wasn't as iconic as Pikachu is in many scenarios back then. Plus, I heard that Let's Go Eevee was instead supposed to be Let's Go Psyduck, which would have referenced the Detective Pikachu movie a few years later. But no matter how it was done, Eevee began appearing as a more popular Pokemon as the games debuted. They even continued to give him a voice in some of the future games, like in Galar. It's just a question that I think is part of the hit. We never really got an Eevee trailer that has gained as much popularity as Ash has, and ever since they created Horizons, they've only really been featuring more Paldea Pokemon rather than original Pokemon for us to see. So I guess for now, it's just something we gotta wait on. But moving on, we arrive to Galar. You see, there's a funny thing about this. I kinda already told you about Galar, which is about the Dragon Fairy Tale that I found in Sylveon's decks. So let's instead skip over to Sinnoh. Now here's another funny fact for you. I don't think Sinnoh's the true region we need to look for a Gen 10 hit. You see, during the same year Gen 4 remakes came out, Pokemon released another game alongside Sinnoh, a sister location to be precise, which we know as Hisui, or Legends Arceus. Now, Legends Arceus is a game that takes place in the past, at most like 200 years ago, which is when Pokeballs were first invented. Now, this time to find a hint, I think we should focus more on the story of the game rather than the details. You see, the game is titled Legends Arceus, right? So Arceus is supposed to be more about a legend, not just any average Pokemon tale about another random kid walking around taking on gyms and getting stronger. It's just all part of history. History on how a kid fell out of the sky and had a unique talent of uniting people with Pokemon. However, even so, I've had a question on my mind about how people tell the story of Legends Arceus, which is, why do they keep saying, we fell out of the sky? We know deep down that from the very beginning of Arceus, we are shown a black world of emptiness floating around until we see Arceus. And then a few minutes later, after we wake up at a beach and meet the professor, we learn about a space rift that has been hovering over Hisui for some time. But this isn't just any random space rift, it's technically a portal that links the past Hisui with the real world. So I don't know why people keep saying we fell out of the sky, because that isn't true. The truth is, we found a portal that brought us to Hisui, and that I think is the third key to Gen 10. So now we arrive to the next game, Scarlet and Violet, and let me warn you, there's a lot of things that connect to this game. But for now, let's focus on what Paldea is. Paldea is best known for its mysterious crater, Area Zero, where many mysterious and unknown Pokemon species live. These species live there due to the amount of Terra Crystals found there. Terra Crystals are a rare materialized substance found within the crater, and their power is very mysterious. It can be used to build machines no one would imagine to be possible, and one machine that interests a lot of people is the Time Machine, which was built by the professors. Now, one thing for certain about this machine is that when you use it, it can bring anyone to the distant past or future. However, there's one small condition about it. You see, if you decide to go to the Time Machine, you'll most likely be stuck. But actually, apart from the scariness of the thought, it's an interesting thing to note about the machine, considering that Hisui was kind of the same scenario, for which we were also not able to return to find the present for an unknown reason. In fact, this might actually be one of the big details towards Gen 10. You see, originally, we were given the task to stop the machine in Scarlet and Violet, but later on in the second part of the DLC, if we were to complete the Indigo Disc and return to the Crystal Lake, we can acquire another copy of the Scarlet and Violet books, which are the same exact books we used to stop the time machine back in Area Zero. It was like the game wanted us to return to the time machine and turn it back on. But however, the only thing is, once we inject the Indigo Disc into the machine, we are never allowed to go back to the time machine room. So the questions everyone began to ask back then were like, what are the books for, or what do the books mean? And to be honest, it's kinda complicated to explain, but just like the title of the video suggests, all paths lead to the Great Courier of Paldea, meaning there's gotta be something we're missing behind this clue. And I think I know what that something is. It's another thing about Scarlet and Violet, but not something about the game or storyline. Rather, it's something about a character that I don't think anyone really truly knows about. And that character is Petty. Petty is a EV trader who can be pretty shy at times, but also has a kind heart towards her friends. And there are some things I want to talk about her that just seemed off to me. You see, the thing I want to talk about is something she mentioned, or something she might even have in the DLC epilogue. And that thing is the Nintendo Switch. Now at first, you might have probably thought that she was a gamer, or maybe she just had another Switch, which is reasonable, but in the Pokemon universe, who owns a Nintendo Switch? Because you see, I know only two types of people with Nintendo Switches: NPCs that sometimes spawn with one, and us, the player. There has never ever been someone we know who has acknowledged to us about Nintendo Switch and Pokemon history until now. And also, a little Easter egg you can find in Penny's room is a bunch of magazines that show a Game Boy, GameCube, and 3DS, which may just seem like random consoles at first, until you begin to realize that all these consoles are consoles Pokemon has influenced adventures off of, such as the Game Boy era giving us Gens 1 to 3, the GameCube era giving us Pokemon Colosseum and Gale of Darkness, and the DS era which pretty much gave us Gens 4 to 7. And if you combine the Switch era like Penny mentioned, that pretty much links almost every Pokemon game she could have played back in those generations. So it's likely that there could be possibly something up with Penny. And actually, I've already discovered a few things that may not all be canon to Scarlet and Violet, but do provide some interesting things that I definitely feel we should take a note on. Like, for instance, in the mobile game Pokemon Masters, you can have Tater as a trader and unlock a sync story for her. And in the sync story, she mentions knowing the Dragon Fairy Tale, the same fairy tale from Galar that I've mentioned earlier from Sylveon's Dex entry. And also, in one of the cards in the Pokemon card game, Penny is seen sitting in the classroom in the evening staring out a window. But if we were to look a little closer, you can see that this is the same room where the final title screen brings us when we meet the professors at the Crystal Lake. It's kind of an interesting note to take on. However, the biggest thing I find the most interesting about her is her connections between Team Star. Now of course, Penny does feel grateful for having all her friends when they created Team Star, but for me, I found it to always be fishy the way they get along. Like, look at this. Penny's friends enroll back at the academy. Penny still feels shy talking to them, and instead just spies on them to make sure they were doing good. While on the other hand, when her friends actually needed help, they decided not to intervene with her, and instead just asked someone else to help them instead in order to free her from the trouble. Now it is true that it should be natural for them to act like this at first, but what really catches me off is how Penny reacts when she discovers what her friends were doing. You see, her reaction was an immediate assumption that her friends didn't want to talk to her anymore for some reason. Now it makes me question, why in the world would she even come to that assumption immediately in the first place? We know that she just made up with her friends at the end of Starfall Street, and even though she did spy on them for a while, they all still cared a lot about each other. So it just adds a huge question. Is Penny really into Team Star if she feels like she doesn't talk to her friends a lot? Because I mean, she never really changes into a Team Star uniform at all, and she also doesn't even do the Team Star hand sign thingy. The closest thing she does to represent Team Star is just say their catchphrase, Hassel and V-Star, and puts a picture of the Team Star logo in her room. I just don't think it's enough. I really don't know if she really wanted to join Team Star for her own intentions, or if she's just doing it to try to be closer with her old friends, because if that's the case, then this system isn't seeming to work. But anyway, for now, we're just gonna have to wait for the anime to show us what's happening. Let's jump into the possibilities of Legend Z. Now, one thing for sure about this game is that we don't know too much about it yet. Other than that, we are probably going to be rebuilding Kalos from scratch. But even so, we do know about the present Kalos, which is X and Y on the 3DS, and we can use that to pre-predict things about Legend Z. Like, for instance, Sylveon was first introduced in Kalos, and since I did talk about Sylveon having a fairy tale, it is possible Sylveon could be a hint towards the next game. But another thing about Legend Z is that it can also have some ties with Paldea. You see, after Ku posted his hints towards Legend Z, he began showing a few things on how Pokemon was hinting at Kalos prior to its release. And in one of the pictures Ku posted was a picture of a guy saying something about 5 buildings in Levincia being owned by a real estate firm called the Paldea Reality. It might not seem too interesting at first, but it made me think about how the story could go on Legend Z. Like, what if it was about us uniting a building team? It could be something that could relate to Team Star, and also could be simple enough for Gamefreak to just make it a short time. Or maybe the story could be different, and Pokemon will just simply have someone or something referring to the Dragon Fairy Tale again to us. The point is that whatever Kalos' story is, I believe it will have some sort of tie with the other Switch games that came out during the Switch era, and eventually all the games will link up to the Dragon Fairy Tale in some sort of way. Because if nearly every Switch game has so far had to do something with the Dragon Fairy Tale, it's possible that Kalos wouldn't be an exception to this scenario. Kalos is probably the last Pokemon game for the Switch before we get the next console, so it's likely that Gamefreak just wants to finish up the Switch era with another Legends game in order to keep the fans hyped for the upcoming generations. So in retrospect, I think it's all just speculation to find Gen 10. And just because Pokemon released a Legends game after Scarlet and Violet doesn't mean that the game is cut from possibilities. Pokemon has made a lot of games within the Nintendo Switch, so I wouldn't be surprised if their intentions was to hold something back in order to be prepared for the next console. So I hope you understand why I'm so persistent over this fairy tale. This fairy tale was referred to twice, and if nearly every Pokemon game can make a contribution to this game, then it's likely that it'll all make a new path returning to Area 0.